All right, we're going to dive into the course with an icebreaker. So be ready in chat to solve to respond to these questions that are going to be in our icebreaker. So here we go. Icebreaker quiz. It's a quiz. So match the percentage of the coalition to the different categories. So match the percentage to the different categories, and I'm going to read out the categories. This is a category. These are the categories that make up the Democratic Party. So if you want to break up the populace of the Democratic Party into different ideological groups, these are 5 groups, how we are typically gathered together. And I want you to figure out what percentage of the Democratic Party is each of these groups. So I'm going to read them through real fast. A is your progressive left. These are your most politically active Democrats. They are relatively young and highly educated, and about 2/3 are white and non-Hispanic. So what percentage do you think falls under progressive left? Next is establishment liberals. They're highly politically engaged. They're one of the most educated groups, and they are very racially and ethnically diverse with a similar age profile that you see in the population as a whole. Next is your Democratic mainstays. So these are older, they're relatively lower share of people are college educated, and it's one of the most racially and ethnically diverse groups. So what percentage do you think falls into that? Next is outsider left. So this is by far the youngest group. These are your young kids, and they're amongst the least politically active. Outsider left. So what percentage over there do you think is outsider left? And let's just the last one is stressed sideliners. So these are the people that are the least politically engaged, and they are actually the most financially stressed as well. So what percentage do you think falls into stressed sideliners? So we got 16%, 23%, 13%, 12%, and 28%.
All right. Terry says for progressive left, we are looking at 12%. For establishment liberals, we're looking at, let me move my little thing here, 23%. For Democratic mainstays, we are looking at 28%. That's what I agree to. There's more of those. For outsider left, we're looking at 13%. And for stress sideliners, we're looking at 16%.
All right. Does anybody have anything different?
Anybody else want to give it a shot? Even on just a couple of them, if you want to try that too. Yeah, I'm with you on I think there's a lot more stress sideliners than most, especially nowadays.
Yeah. All right, let's see what those.
I got to take a quiz once, and I am a progressive left. I'm very liberal, more liberal than I think I am. Susan says for progressive left, 12%, and for Democratic mainstays, 28%. For outsider left, we're looking at 13%, and for stress sideliners, we're looking at 16%.
All right.
Yeah, so the same on stress sideliners as Terry. And yeah, the same on progressive left, and the same on Democratic mainstays. So,
all right, let's
go
board. You guys are pretty spot on. 12%. The smallest percentage is 12% is the progressive left. The next in terms of size is stress sideliners. That's at 13%. And then your outsider left at 16%. And then a large majority, over half of people who identify in the Democratic Party are either establishment liberals or they're your Democratic mainstays. So that's definitely where a majority of your people are at. So this course today is about going out and interacting with voters. So this will hopefully kind of give you an idea that when you are talking to people, most of the time, more than half the time, the people that you are going to be engaging with are going to fall underneath that establishment liberal or a Democratic mainstay. So that means that they're solidly liberal, they're very much supporters of the Democratic Party. They identify as moderate or identify as moderates. Most people fall into that category. And then you do have, 12% that are going to be amongst that very liberal views across the board. And then you're going to have on the other end, you're going to have a little bit more of what's considered this outsider left. So they're very liberal, but they have a dissatisfaction with both parties. And then you got your stressed sideliners that are, they kind of got mixed political views. So I find that the outsider left and the stressed sideliners, these tend to be the ones that don't vote. You're non-voters. So this information comes from a Pew Research poll that was done for after the 2020 general election to gauge where people are at, where they fell on this on this spectrum. And interesting, so I showed you the Democratic side. There's also for the Republican side as well, you can kind of look at that. So amongst the Republicans, they also have this stressed sideliners. So when you're talking about your swing voters, these are your swing voters, right? So it's coming from both sides. So you got 15% on the Republican that are swing on the Republican side. You got 13% that swing on the Democratic side. So these are the ones that a majority of campaigns that need to pick up voters from the Republican side are going to be going after. And if you're good at math, you would notice that those numbers that I provided do not add up to 100. It's because there are people in the Democratic Party that actually fall under like more ambivalent right or populist right sections. So that is part of our party. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of perspective as we go in, and we're talking about talking to voters, who those voters are, where they are, at least from a political standpoint. Like I said, most of them are going to be either establishment liberals or mainstays, but then some of them might be either really progressive, really liberal, or like I said, those swing voters that have a mix of views in between. So just keep that in mind as we're going through and talking about engaging with voters. So today's goals are, we are going to, this is similar to Unlock Your Political Power, where Unlock Your Political Power is about using story and listening and to then talk to people that you already know and get them, organize the people that you know and get them to, ask them to become more politically engaged. So today we are talking those same similar ideas about using story and values to reach out to people, but this is going to be you reaching out to people that you don't know. This is talking more to you're volunteering on a campaign to phone bank or knock on doors or have conversations with people you don't know. Or it could also be amongst the people that you do know, those more difficult conversations, the ones that are the person you're talking to either doesn't care or may disagree with you. So how to have those more difficult conversations. So today we're going to start with talking about that power, understanding that power of your story, how to do that active listening to get that person to build up that trust and understand where they're coming from, growing that understanding. We're going to start off by talking about where people are coming from, so you can you could kind of get kickstart into understanding where they're coming from. And then we'll spend some time building up that confidence. So when that volunteer opportunity comes along to make calls or knock on doors or table for an event and do that direct contact with voters, your arm's going to go up. It's going to go up. You're going to want to go and do it because you have the confidence to go out there and do that. All right, first question of the night. Again, use chat like we did for the icebreaker. First question tonight: how do you feel when you are asked to make calls or to knock on the doors of voters? How do you feel? Like, what's happening in your body when that happens? It's just like, what's the first thought that comes into your head? What are those feelings that you have? So share in chat how you feel when you're asked to either make phone bank, as they call it, or canvas to knock on doors.
Pauline mentions intimidated. Leslie talks about angst. Joanne says, I do it all the time, but I have to admit I get nauseous when I think about it, especially at the beginning of the cycle. Yes.
Yes.
Gilda, nervous. People may not want to engage. Terry, I don't want to knock on a door alone. I want a buddy.
Yeah.
Janet,
Yep.
like to do face to face. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while. We went through a whole general election without doing this. So it has been a while. Talk about being rusty, right? And we mentioned being nervous, even though you've done it before. It's like, it's a habit. And when you fall out of habit, it's hard to get back in to those habits. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, is how to get back into that habit. Because we know that if you are prepared, you're going to have more confidence, and having confidence is the way that you push through those negative feelings, right? If you have feeling anxious, or that when you're confident that you can go out there and handle yourself in those conversations, have good conversations, that's going to help you push through those nerves. And then having that good practice is going to build up those good habits. So none of us have done this in a long time, right? So we all need to get back into having good going through some good practice, so we can build up those good habits again. And when you're talking to voters, you'll hear on campaigns, they'll talk about using persuasion techniques and stuff like that to talk to voters. And there's various ways to do that, but none of that matters. You can't even go there right now, because first you need people to understand what you're saying, right? You need to be able to communicate. And in order for them to understand, they first have to listen. They have to hear you. And in order for you to be heard, you got to use that common language. So use those words that cut through. I know we hear a lot about messaging, how we need better messaging. And it's just like, well, we need to speak in a way that people can hear us, right? The information's going out, the White House doing a great job getting information out there every which way, but no one's listening to it. Right. So we got to make sure that we are breaking through and that people can actually hear us. And the way to do that, one is these one-on-one conversations, which makes it so important that when a campaign or your local Democratic Party is asking for volunteers, that your hand goes up, because we need as many people having those one-on-one conversations that people can actually, will actually hear you. But then also what you say. In using words, using those that common language is the way that when you do have those one-on-one conversations, you're going to be able to break through to that person that you're talking to. So that's what we're going to cover today. So you use those values and story to be able to get people to understand, and then that will become that persuasion that is going to persuade that voter to take action, or perhaps persuade that voter to volunteer alongside you, or persuade that voter to do a little bit more, maybe donate or contribute in some way to a campaign. So it all starts with values and story. So we want to make sure that you're using common language. What do I mean by that? What is common language? Well, here in the US, going back since as long as the US has been the US, this isn't a new thing since Trump came along. This has been the history of the US, as we've had these two moral systems in the US. We've had conservative moral system and the progressive moral system. And under these, these are pure models. Under these models of conservatism and progressive is under the progressive side, people are more nurturing. They care about everyone. So you're raised to care about everyone, and your sense of morality then comes from taking care of others. That's one way to do it. And then there's another moral system that comes from a hierarchy. Everything is under a sense of hierarchy. and you care a lot, but you care a lot about the people in whatever your defined in-group is. And then your sense of morality then comes from your discipline, your personal discipline. So these are the two moral systems that have been in this country for a long time. Again, these are pure models. Most people are somewhere on a spectrum in between those. But because we have these two systems, these two moral systems, you know, it's like each one of us, then our brains, they're kind of wired differently. So when you're raised under one model or the other, it actually wires your brain to form your logic, to form your sense of morality, and to also, it even affects the way that you interpret facts. So therefore, we will experience facts and logic and morality differently. So you can't use those to then relate to one another. And because our brains are then wired differently, if you're meeting somebody who like if you're a progressive and you're meeting a conservative person, or vice versa, for conservative people, if they're when they're meeting you, they might think you're crazy. Right? I know I grew up and lived for most of my life in a blue dot. I never even met a Republican, never even met one. So when I heard about Republicans on TV, I thought they were crazy. They must be crazy. Then my daughter gets up and she wants a different kind of experience. She moves to Wyoming. She was suddenly the only liberal anybody had ever met, and they think she's crazy. It's like, no, we're not crazy, right? You're not crazy. They're not crazy. Our brains are just wired differently, and it's okay. We're all people, you know, we're all coming from different places. So it's very important to realize that, yeah, no one's crazy. It's just the way that our brains are wired, and no one is better than the other. It's all okay. So we want to make sure that we are then choosing words that aren't then tied in that fact or logic or morality, which is automatically going to be in disagreement with people that don't share exactly where we are on that moral spectrum, right? Between progressive and conservative. There's that spectrum there. And unless somebody is in your exact same lane, you can't use facts, logic, and morality. So what can you use? You can use values, our common core values, talk about what drives you underneath. And you can use personal story. And when you're using this personal story, you want to be engaging that empathy in people that you know, because that's the common tie. We showed that that progressives are traditionally raised to care about everyone, and then conservatives care a lot about people that are in whatever groups that they define. Therefore, if you keep talking about people that are within your group, so personal to you, then you're going to be able to share that story across the entire spectrum. So again, you can use your values, you can use your story, and you can use empathy for people that you know. Now, this does not mean that everyone that you talk to is going to agree with you. It's politics. Where's the fun in everybody agreeing with you, right? It's just like we grow by talking with people who aren't in complete agreement with us. So you're not trying to get everybody right off the bat to agree with you. What you want them to do is that you want them to understand you. You want to be able to say words and for them to hear them, for them to think about them, to make that connection. They want to understand you, and then you want to be able to understand them. That is using that common language. So let's put this into an example. So just imagine, close your eyes and imagine that you are making phone calls for a candidate, and you know, just based off how you ran those phone calls, how the turf was cut there, that you're talking to somebody who is likely struggling financially. And they say to you, there's already too much spending in the government. It's something that a voter is saying to you. Let's say you're ask them what's important to them, and they say, oh, there's just too much spending going on in the government. So Bad response would be like, hey, I think you are, you're struggling financially. It's against your self-interest to not want the government to spend money in when you could be taking, some of these services could be helping you. That would be a bad response, is to first go towards something like an argument about why that person shouldn't feel the way that they feel, right? You first immediately go to logic and morality. You want to just ignore those. Ignore that instinct you might have to argue or correct. Ignore all that. Instead, listen to what the person says and encourage them to share more, so you can really find out what those similarities are between you and that person. So right now there's already too much spending in the government. You know nothing about that person. There's nothing personal there. You have no idea what drives them. So let's find out. Let's ask them. So if somebody says something where it is a policy stance or something like that, get it personal. Ask them to make it personal. So, say, hey, well, how does that relate to you personally, like in your life? Give me an example. Right? So get them to dig down a little bit. Let's say then you're talking to that person and they say, I want to start a business someday. And when I do, I don't want to be taxed. Right? I want to start a business someday. And when I do, I don't want to be taxed. Again, you want to ignore any logic or morality in trying to tell them, well, what tax policy your candidate might be proposing. You're not talking policy, right? You want to ignore any logic that might be in there. It's like, well, how are you going to start a business, if you don't have, if your city isn't giving you tax breaks and stuff, right? Ignore all that. Ignore your logic, ignore your morals, ignore the policy, right? Ignore, let's say, what they're saying about not wanting to be taxed. You completely disagree with it. Ignore that too. Instead, focus on the part that they shared, right? What did they share? They said they want to start a business. That's personal. They just shared something personal. You now know something about them. They want to start a business. What's something you agree on? Entrepreneurship is great, right? Being an entrepreneur, that's super important. That's important to you. Well, it's important to me too. All right. So ignore the bait that's flying around out there. Ignore all that. Focus on that person and focus on that thing that you have in common. And then you can respond. In this case, I would respond with a story saying, like, starting a business is important to me too. That's great. Just talk about how wonderful that is that they want to do that. And I can share then a story saying my daughter just started a business. And the biggest barrier for her has actually been in terms of cost has actually been healthcare. So getting insurance for herself. And so for her, the most, as being an entrepreneur like yourself, the most important thing for her is lowering that cost of healthcare. That is how she's going to succeed. So speaking it in terms of that, and then turn it around, asking them, how about you? What is a barrier you face? Right? Not talking policy, trying to avoid those minefields of policy, but again, focusing in on what you have in common, focusing in on a story. Those common words, those common things that you're trying to identify when people are sharing their story, say them. So when that person said, they want to start a business, you want to be thinking, okay, what does that mean? What is valuable to them if they want to start a business? Oh, entrepreneurship must be a value to them. Say it. Let's say it out loud, right? Say these words, say these common feelings underneath. There's a whole bunch of them. This is just, the slide has a bunch of them, but there's way more. So say the words. Don't let things go implied. Always say them out loud. These are the words that are going to connect with that person that you're talking to. So connect on this is sharing those values. This is identifying that person's values and then sharing how it is a common value with yourself as well. So this is how you start a conversation and getting them to hear you. Now that person's going to hear me. I'm not just jibber jabbering about some policy or something that they don't, is going to fly right over their head. This is talking as people. We both think that starting a business is great. Yeah, my daughter started a business. Maybe I can help, sharing that story can help her out. So again, say those words, talk about the things that you have in common, find out who that person is, and then share a story. So how do you get there? How do you get to the point that you have that story? I have that story about my daughter to pull out of my back pocket. If it doesn't just come naturally to you, we're humans. When we're talking to other humans, we like to find things, ways that we can relate to them. It's just what we do as people. But to build up that confidence, to get you to have what I call these stories to relate to in your back pocket, you can run through this self-reflection. So this is comes out of the Unlock Your Political Power. We did that for coming up with these stories put in your back pocket to talk to people same stories you use then when you're doing your phone banking, your text banking, your door knocking. You want to use those same those same stories and values. So how do you get to them? We'll go through it real fast. Is how do you get to those stories and that connect to your values? First, you want to know what your core values are. So we're going to run through real fast how to find those core values. Next is to recall a time that you felt one of those values. So that's your story. When did you feel that? When did that value really connect to you in a real way in your life? And then really important then here at the end, those last two, we're in go time. You're going to be volunteering on campaigns or for the party. How do then those values, how do you see that reflected in a campaign? And then ask people to come join you in what you are doing to help out that campaign and get involved. So we're going to go quickly through an example of going through these 4 steps. So first, what are those values? We hear about those values, showed you a big long page of a bunch of values. So what are they? How do you find out what the values are that are really important to you? So values aren't issues and values aren't policy, right? So economic inequality, that is a very important issue, right? The policy behind that could be raising the minimum wage, right? That's very important. I hope it is very important to you. But when we're going out and we're talking to voters, we're not saying the words economic inequality, and we're not going to say the words raising the minimum wage. At least we're definitely not going to start there. We're going to then talk about those values underneath that drives that, right? Economic inequality is important to me because justice is important to me, right? You want to be talking about then justice. Go to people and say, justice is important to me. You're going to get that nodding along. Let's dig down a little bit more. So how do you find what is that core value that then is making an economic inequality important to you, or raise the minimum wage important to you? What is that? What is it that's really driving you towards that? So to find that, first, just when I say economic inequality, how do you feel? How does that make you feel? What is that emotion that you feel? Is it frustration? Are you angry? Hopefully you have a negative connotation with the word economic inequality. So what is that for you? It's going to be different for every person. And it's really important that when you're speaking about this stuff, you're coming from yourself. You want to be authentic. People will be able to tell when you're speaking from an authentic place. So really, how are you feeling? And then think about why. Why do you feel that way, right? So for me, when I think of economic inequality, I get mad. I'm just angry. Why? Why am I angry? Why does that make me angry? And it's like for me, it's not right. That's wrong. Economic inequality just for me is wrong. And I think that we're in America. This is our right? Liberty, pursuit of justice, of liberty and justice for all. Like, that is being an American. And economic inequality is preventing people from getting from experiencing, from being, enjoying those freedoms and liberty of being an American. For me, so it's just wrong. It's un-American for me to see people that are suffering from economic inequality. And it's not just people, right? I can put a face on it. It's my child. But my child is working minimum wage and can't pay their rent. That's wrong. That's wrong. Right? That makes me angry. Right? My child they can't be free. They can't be a free, full American adult because of economic inequality. So again, dig down, be able to be vulnerable, open up, share something personal about yourself. All right. So I like to do this quick little primer for myself to when I hear about an issue, to walk through it. So take any issue. Let's go back to economic inequality. You can take any issue and you can say, how do you make you feel? I feel angry. And why? Why do you feel, why is it making you feel angry? That's when you got to do that thinking. And for me, it's because freedom is important to me. And working full time does not even pay my child enough to afford their rent, let alone a chance to live a life of their choosing, right? So do that homework ahead of time to really be able to identify it and then put the words to it, to be able to say it. So when you're in conversation with someone, you can pull this out of your back pocket and you're using those good common words. You're saying these words out loud. So again, let's put it in chat. If somebody wants to share, and I feel, let's go back. Let's use economic inequality. So I feel, how do you feel? Because what is that core value that's driving it for you? It could be a whole bunch of things. It could be a sense of, because justice is important to you, because compassion is important to you. What is it? What is it that drives you the most? It could be multiple things, but pick one. And then tell a short little personal story about why. How does that walk into your life and really affect your life? So if we have one to share, go ahead and share that.
So Angela says, I feel angry because people are being displaced in the name of progress.
People, who's people? Again, we don't want to talk about people. We want to talk about people we know. So put a name on it. Who is it? Is it who is it to you? What's the relation to you? Or put a name and a face on that. That is going to be what will connect with everybody. If you can be vulnerable and if you can share that personal story. So it doesn't have to be you, it can be someone you know, but put a name on it. And how do you know them?
Oh, Terry says, I feel frustrated because fairness is important to me. I want each of my kids to have a good life in each of their chosen professions. They work hard and want to serve others. Yes.
Good. That's good. So that's good. Talking about getting personal with your kids. Again, it can be hard. This is why why Democrats have to have training on this, because we are not used to talking about politics in personal terms. We're used to talking about politics, what we see, on pundits on TV talk about. And what we hear, we talk about it in theoretical terms, or we want to take care of everybody, right? So if you want to take care of everybody, you don't need to put a personal face on it. You can just say people, and people will care about people. Well, if you want to talk to everybody, you can't just say people. You got to make it personal. You got to have that cut through. So, the pundits aren't up there, open up their lives and talking about personal stuff, right? They're just talking about, stuff in theory. Well, that doesn't work. If it worked, we wouldn't be here. If it worked, we'd have one or two pundits on TV and they do all the work for us. But we know that doesn't work. People want to talk, they need to hear this from us. We're the messengers, and we need to share this personal story, not one story, not the candidate story. That's another thing. We're not sharing the candidate story. The candidate can have the world's most compelling personal story. When you're talking to that voter, the candidate's not standing in front of them. You're the messenger. Your own personal story is the messenger, right? So first thing you want to do is get them to feel and understand you. All right, so going back to the 4 steps, the final 2 steps then are very important to make that pivot from talking about personal stuff to then relating it to the work at hand. So connecting it to a campaign and then making that ask, showing why it's so important that they join in you. So here's my same example as before, but now I'm adding on to the end after I share that I feel angry because freedom is important to me and working full-time does not even pay my child enough for their rent, let alone the chance to live a life of their choosing. And that is why I support Joe Neguse as my representative, because he is standing with my child as they strike and demand higher wages. And I'm volunteering for Joe to go door to door. Will you join me? So that's the whole speech that you want to have lined up, is how you feel. What is that core value? Say it, say that word that is going to get that person to nod along with you. So say the word freedom, you're going to get them to nod along with you. Share that personal story about my kid working full time and still can't pay their rent. And then tie it to a campaign. So in Colorado, Joe Neguse, he really did. My child they were picketing and they were on strike. So they are a grocery worker. And Joe Neguse was out there literally on the line with them. And I'm just like, that's my guy. That right there. So Joe, I mean, he had my vote anyway, but now even more so. I'm like, all right, I'm staying with Joe. What does he need? And then making that ask, no matter who you're talking to, no matter how the conversation goes, you want to make sure that you're including an ask to every person that you're talking to. Ask them to participate, ask them to come along with you, right? We don't want to just be the only ask they ever hear is for their vote. We want them to hear about participating all throughout. People have to be asked over and over and over again. So even if you're talking to somebody and the conversation's not going so great, still put that ask in there, because if they have to be asked 8 times for them to actually participate, you make sure that when you're talking to them, you're logging one of those times that they're asked. Plus, I mean, it builds respect, right? You are telling that person that their time is valuable, right? Their values are valuable to you. So make that ask every single time. Tell them what you're doing and then ask them to join you. All right, now we're going to share a short video to show this in action. What does this look like? What does it actually look like when you are talking to voters? So back on Pete's campaign, we made a canvassing 101 video to show exactly what canvassing looks like. So we're going to go along with Julia as she puts everything that we just covered into action. So I'm going to share this. I'm going to try to fast forward to the to the right spots. Hold on. You don't need to see all this.
Okay, so I'm looking at my app. I have my next door. I'm going to go talk to Linda and have a conversation. On this door, I can tell I'm kind of in the sun. I want to try to make sure I remove my sunglasses so it's a little more welcoming when I have that conversation with her. Puppies! Puppies!
Does this look familiar for anybody who's door knocked before?
Sorry, she's crazy. No worries. She's adorable. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, my name's Julia. I'm a volunteer with Pete for America. We're out here in your neighborhood today talking to voters about the upcoming primary election on March 3rd.
Yes.
Have you thought much about the primary and who you're voting for?
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. There's some really good candidates.
They really are.
I don't know that I'm settled. I've been, really wanted to vote for a woman. I did last time, and I wanted to work this time.
Definitely understand that. I definitely am in the same boat. I really wanted a woman last time. And even more so, I definitely thought I was going to be supporting a female candidate this year as well. So for me, that's a huge thing as a woman, that I wanted someone who was going to work for female issues,
right?
Particularly with reproductive justice for me. That's a huge one. And that actually ironically is what drew me to Pete, was his Building Power plan and his commitment to put 50% women on the judicial bench
Really?
and to make his cabinet 50% women, which has never been promised before in a political campaign.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like his demeanor.
He's a really good human. What are your other values that really drive you in this election?
Healthcare.
Definitely.
You know, our healthcare system is so screwed up. So many people go without, but I also know that a lot of people are really happy with what they have.
Yeah.
You know, actually, I like our insurance. I just, you know, I wish costs were more under control. So.
Yeah, I'm definitely right there with you. My dad is battling cancer,
Yeah.
and he needs Medicare for
sorry.
all, and I like my private health insurance. And that's actually a thing that drew me to Pete, was the Medicare for all who want it, is that I could keep the healthcare I like without having to sacrifice for my dad, which was a really special thing for me, that both of us get what we want out of this plan.
Okay.
So,
All right, I'm gonna cut it off there. But one, I hope that anybody who has door knocked before, that felt familiar, maybe a little bit of that rust came off a little bit, just seeing that cadence, right? One thing that Julia is very good at is giving that time and that patience to let people think, to ask them what is important to them, not just once but twice. Give them additional time to really think about what is important, and then making that connection with whatever that person says. Make a connection to your personal life. When they said that it was important, that healthcare is important to them, like they like their insurance, but they want costs to be lower. Julia was right there ready with a personal story along those exact same lines, saying, how she likes, as a teacher, she likes her insurance, but her dad's on Medicare, right? So being right there with that, connecting on those personal, on a personal level with each person you're talking to. So Julia, being the professional that she is, professional volunteer that she is, she has those stories ready to go, right? About, okay, if someone's going to talk about healthcare, it's hard. It's hard for her to talk about her dad and his illness, but she's ready. If somebody wants to talk about healthcare, she has those stories ready. As a teacher, she's ready to then share those stories about how education is important to her. So doing that homework, so you can open up in those moments and share with the person you're talking to. You're putting a face on yourself. When you do that, you're getting them to listen, to understand you. You saw that Julia was actually passing on policy points there, but she did it under the guise of, we're connecting on these personal values. I'm sharing a personal story. And then, like I said, she twice asked them what was important to them. And she said the words. She said, what values are important to you? Use those words. Don't be coy. Go ahead and say what values are important to you. What issues are important to you? What is affecting your life right now? Right. So don't be coy. Go in there and ask those questions, and ask them more than once if you need to. So, move on. Okay. So again, so when you're knocking on that door, and you might be nervous about what somebody might say, the first thing is that when you knock there, you want to be open. You want to stay open. You want to have good open body language. If you're talking to somebody in person, I say even on the phone, people can tell body language. They can tell expression on the phone. So be very conscious to stay open. And no matter what that person says, no matter what they come out and say, you're going to be open, and you are going to be curious about what they have to say. and you were going to want to ask them, dig down, drill down more, right? So if they open the door and they talk about something that is like a talking point they might have heard on some awful cable news channel, or they're terribly misinformed or whatever, no matter what they say, don't correct them, don't judge them, don't avoid any instinct to do that. Instead, ask them for more. Tell me more. How if they're talking about something that's not personal, ask them to make it personal. How does that affect you? How does that affect your life? Can you share with me, what that means to you personally, right? So get them. You want to be curious about them as a person. So stay open. And just by not pushing back, let's say somebody does push and they throw a talking point in your face, they're pushing you. The expectation, these days when for political conversations is somebody pushes and says something, very strong or offensive at you. The expectation is that you're going to push back, right? That's the expectation. So when they push on you and instead you just open up and you absorb it, you've automatically put yourself into a different space. You've broken that typical political cycle and you're handing the microphone back to them. And you're instantly, boom, you've diffused whatever situation they were trying to create. And you've given them this space where you are automatically curious. And then Julia showed that, ask a question and give them time to think and respond, right? Don't just fill in that air. If it feels awkward to you, Julia's a teacher, so I'm sure she says, you count to 10 in your head, right? If you can't stand the silence, just be counting in your head, and give that person that time to think. Get and allow them to, that's also kind of being awkward like that together. That's a sense of being vulnerable together. So that will hopefully encourage them to open up as well. And then when you go into these conversations, yes, you got your homework in your back pocket of what to say, but actually when you go in, what you want to be doing, you want to be focusing on is focusing on listening. So you want to be more of moderating a conversation than just saying a speech. Now, I know if you're working on a campaign, that you could be working on a campaign that hands you a script and they want you, okay, on the phone bank, I want you to, here's your exact script. I mean, it's down to, hello, my name is, exact script. I offer that if you want to make effective use of your time, you deviate from the script at the beginning to make sure that you've got buy-in, that you've got that person listening to you and understanding you. So instead, at the beginning, you can introduce yourself and then ask them, like you said, Julia, do, it's just like, ask them, what's important to them. What is an issue, can you share something that an issue that's going on that's really important to you right now? If it's a campaign or something that a lot of people perhaps have heard about, ask them if they've heard about it, if they've thought about it, right? So you're starting off with a question of them. And like I said, no matter what they say in response, you're going to ask them for more. Oh, tell me more about that. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. You're going to get them to say something personal, get it down to a personal level, say what's important to them, and then you can make that connection with them. So again, if you're going into these and you're nervous, you don't know what to say. Maybe you're nervous because just speaking from a script, you sound like a robot. Go off script. You want to create this comfortable setting. And you're doing that by, like I said, you're first going to go in and you're just going to listen. You're just going to listen. Everybody wants to be listened to. Everybody wants to be respected. So give them that moment when you're first talking to them. And then when you give them that moment, ask them to share, to open up. Then if that's going to be reciprocal, if they are able to share, saying something personal about them, then they're much more likely to listen to you when you share a personal story about yourself. So use that reciprocity to your advantage to get them to listen. There's a couple quotes here I like to keep in mind when I'm going out there, and is like for Maya Angelou, that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I like thinking about that quote when I go out there, because I can trip all over my words. I can trip up the stairs even, but if I make that person feel good, that's what they're going to remember, right? And when you go out there, you are representing that campaign, you're representing, or the Democratic Party, right? You're a representation of that. So if that person can say, hey, that candidate, I really like that person, that came to the door and talked to me, that felt good. When they see that candidate, they're going to feel good, right? So you can do that. So I like to keep that in mind. Also, Pete says, how people feel about you is largely driven by how you make them feel about themselves. So again, if you can go into those conversations with that, wanting to make that person, make it a very positive experience for them, make them feel like they were heard, that they were listened to, like that they are respected, they're going to turn around, they're going to listen to that candidate, they're going to feel respected by that candidate. So really fast here to bring it home, because we're getting right to 9 o'clock. So there's a workbook that goes along with this class that has examples to walk you through all of this stuff, so you can get right into walking yourself through these different steps. And there's also this active listening guide. So active listening is these little habits that really make a difference in making people feel heard. So this is asking those leading questions to moderate those conversations, and then doing the little things, nodding your head along, saying, okay, yeah, as people are talking, to make them know that you are being heard, or that they are being heard. And this takes practice. This is hard. Especially since none of us have done this for a long time. So just know that give yourself some grace, that it's going to take a while to build these muscles back up, for, to fight that instinct to respond, to be open, to be curious, to ask those leading questions, to use those little things that make people feel heard, have those to-go canned responses. So in that moment that you might feel, startled or whatever, you can respond with saying, that's interesting. I think I've heard that before, but tell me more about it, right? Rather than showing that reaction to what they're saying. That all takes time. So yeah, give yourself a little bit of grace. And we are right here at the end. The last two things is that to make yourself feel more useful to the person that you're talking to is one, to offer a service to them. Say, let's say you're helping somebody, get to their primary location, and they don't know where it is. You don't need to be a know-it-all. You don't need to say that, oh, I know exactly where it is, and have all that home, do all that work ahead of time to know where each precinct location is. No. It's like, but you can say, I don't know. And in saying, I don't know, you're being vulnerable, and that's helping them connect to you. But you say, I don't know, but in that moment, we can look it up, right? We all have our smartphones. So let's say, hey, let's look that up together. We can get some good, show them some good resources in that moment, and get them the help that they need right away. And then also, like I said, no matter where that conversation is going, always make sure that you are following up with that ask. So actually say the words, don't leave it implied. Actually say the words. So if you're at voting time, it's like, hey, can I count on you to vote for this candidate, right? If you're making donation calls, no matter how the conversation goes, it means so much for if you can chip in $5. Always be making that ask. And again, like I said, you can go to the workbook. You can find activities to walk you through and get you right into it. All right.